Okay, it is Wednesday, June 4th. We are gathered here for our curriculum committee. We are joined today by Jeff Vivenzio, elementary school principal, Lisa Cardillo, our high school principal here, and the rest of our committee. Barbara Owens will be joining us remotely.
All right. Yeah. So I have the agenda up so y'all can see it, and we'll get started. So agenda for today, principals are here because we want to talk about the MTSS plan actually. Give a quick update on testing refusals. Karen has a really nice update on media literacy, and then also cell phones. Just a quick conversation that I might switch after MTSS since Lisa's here. If that's all right, Lisa.
Sure.
All right. So let's get into it. So the MTSS plan.
Okay, so it kind of starts about a little over a year and a half ago. A team of us went to a few-day training on MTSS and really just getting more background. So switching from our current whether you call it SBIT or different structures, moving towards MTSS, which is
multi-tiered system of support.
Correct, which is required.
Right.
But it's
which we have a board policy on that as well.
But it was understanding that it was going to be like a 3-year process, right? So created a timeline of where we wanted to be, and we're pretty much on track. So this year, each of the buildings had MTSS committees. We had a draft plan that we were building and looking at throughout the year, and spent a great deal of time discussing it and building that. So really in that structure is looking at a more systems approach, right? So you're going to get your triangles when you think of RTI, the pyramid, you get that information. The idea of having your tier 1 instruction, tier 2 instruction, tier 3 instruction, and of course you hear a lot about interventions all the time from there. Most basically, when you look at the systems approach, is looking at everything across the district or your buildings, right? Having MTSS teams, but also having teacher teams, and looking at our core instruction. Is our core instruction really meeting the needs of the students? And you talk about 80%. So are we truly meeting the needs? And I feel like some of the work that we've done at the elementary level, I don't want to leave out middle school, high school, but looking at some of our programs has better helped us to implement that 80% model to reach more students. So changing instruction is a part of that. Beyond that, I think the term interventions, and who provides interventions, how that's done, gets convoluted a little bit. And I think MTSS is going to help clear that up for everyone. Meaning, interventions do not only have to occur by a math specialist. They don't have to occur by a reading specialist. Interventions often occur and start with the classroom teacher, and that's where it should start. And there should be multiple levels of intervention that are taking place. So sometimes you hear tier 1 interventions, tier 2 interventions. I want to be clear. Classroom teachers can do tier 1 interventions and can do tier 2 interventions as well. And in some cases, they can do tier 3 interventions, right? I want to also be clear, this is a shift from what we are currently doing at all the buildings to a certain extent, right? If you ask me if teachers are doing interventions in classrooms already, absolutely 100% they are. Do I think we do an amazing job of tracking those interventions that we're doing in the classroom? That's something that's a work in progress that I think everybody would agree we're building on. So and having a multi-tier support system like this, we also talk about having a data management system that goes along with that. And again, we are in the beginning stages of that. We have a program called Branching Minds that we have purchased, and we are slowly, and I will say I've been a big part of the slow piece because for me as an administrator, I want to fully understand the program myself so that I can better support teachers in understanding the program and how to use that. So the capabilities of this program is, down the road is that our teachers will be able to log those interventions into the system right beginning when those tier 1 and tier 2 level interventions in the classroom. Then that way, when it becomes a recommendation to the MTSS team, and our MTSS team is made up at each building level of a variety of professionals that provide specific support to students, whether it's in reading and math, classroom teachers, special education teachers, a team of professionals, social emotional support. Thank you, Lisa.
Behaviors.
Yep.
Attendance.
To look at everything, right? Because we're looking at academics, we're looking at health, we're looking at social emotional, and we're looking at attendance. So
can I break you up for a second? Just kind of go over a couple key points that
Sure.
you said. One,
sorry, I speak fast.
No, you did a good job. It was very, very good. I just want to be clear on this. This is a K-12 plan, right? So one of the things that we've talked about for years is a continuity between all of it, right? What happens in the elementary school, making sure middle school is a clarity and high school. So this MTSS plan really does help get that K-12 mentality of all expectations across the board to hit all levels of students, right? And all the needs of the kids, like you're talking about social emotional, your academic. The benchmarking program that they're talking about, benchmarking the data program, there has been no data system here that takes all of it together. Right now, it's people have to do it on their own. It takes time. Kelly, you live it.
It becomes a management and a time nightmare because you want to focus on instruction, not on record keeping.
Right. So bringing this system in will allow the district, after it gets it up and working, because it's going to take time, it will allow teachers in the district to easily have all the interventions, everything put in place and say, oh, here's what that kid is. Here's what we know about this student. Instead of everybody wasting 2 days just trying to get that information.
And not losing that as they go from one year to the next.
Exactly. And here's what interventions have been put into place and get the data to support it over a multi-year period.
Yeah, and I think another key component is this MTSS plan isn't something that's been worked in a silo. It's been years of conversation going through it, but also our PD also emulates that. So Dr. Kelly Brock has come in and she's worked a full year with staff. What has she worked a full year on staff with? Tier 1 interventions, right? Conversations about engagement. So all of these things intertwine in together. So like we've already been providing a lot of the resources for people as we started moving forward into these shifts. And we know it's going to take time. But I just wanted to clarify a couple of those quick things.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we get into it. And then we have a slideshow too. So.
Yeah, go to the next slide too. So, so this one kind of breaks down that pyramid a little bit further too. It talks more about school-wide responsibilities, talks about teacher team responsibilities, and it really does a great job of breaking it down. The plan is more thorough and intricate and details everything out. So obviously there's teacher-led teams, and then, like I said, the school-wide teams. And again, all are involved in the tier 1 and tier 2 interventions. One of the things that I find is huge and a great takeaway from this is, and I'll just speak for the elementary level. So I think that there's times that we do a great job doing interventions, so those interventions are occurring in the classroom, and let's say that they're not working, then either math AIS and or reading AIS might start providing interventions to those students. Often those interventions come outside the classroom, right? When they start those interventions, oftentimes our teachers stop doing their interventions because now they have a trained professional that's doing those interventions. This model is different. So when you have a tier 1 intervention, let's say it's being done by the classroom teacher, if you then move to a tier 2 intervention, that tier 2 intervention is in addition to the tier 1 intervention, right? So not in place of, in addition to. And both by law are supposed to be in addition to your core instruction. And then again, when you get to tier 3, and when you think about tier 3, it can look different. Whether it's a reduction of group size, an increase in frequency. Most often when you get to tier 3, you may have a 1-to-1 intervention for an extended period of time. Again, when you're doing that tier 3 intervention, it's in addition to the tier 2 intervention, in addition to the tier 1. That's something that is going to be a shift. It's been a challenge, and it's always a question of resources when it comes to district, right? That's important and time, right? Time and resources. But I think that's where you see the most significant changes. And if you don't see the significant changes, you can come back and say, we've exhausted all these interventions and our students are still not making progress and growth. So it helps us to get to the next step.
When you have this, K-5 usually does a very good job on this, right? Like this is where it's rooted from. You get to 6-8, you start bringing a lot more like the social emotional components, the attendance components, the academic components. It starts really driving it. In 6 through 12, this is a struggle area. This is a struggle area for 6 through 12 organizations across the board. So this MTSS plan really will help solidify that plan to help kind of guide 6 through 12. And Lisa, you can even talk probably 9 through 12. Doing tiered interventions even gets more difficult because it's so content-based. And I think, Robin, you get it, right? Like,
And not having the common branch teacher anymore,
it becomes
you
even
don't
harder.
have all that time.
That's why having a set plan really does help guide the staff and the district and buildings understanding where they need to go.
Right. And I think that's where branching meetings will help a little bit with that, because when we're providing an intervention, every teacher of that student will be able to see what the interventions are. So that'll help with that communication piece a little bit as well.
And I think to Frank's point, right, we had Kelly Brock in, she talked about engagement. And I apologize, I'm an elementary guy. I know it, right? I know it inside and out. But some of the things that you talk about when it gets to middle school and high school instruction, and we say the same thing at the elementary school. If we taught a 90-minute reading block to the whole group, the entire 90 minutes, we lose the majority of our kids after the first 20 to 30 minutes. Lose it. We can't do it. Small group instruction, and again, developmentally, that's appropriate, right? Kindergarten students aren't going to engage as long as high school seniors and or AP seniors, right? But I think the point is whole group instruction should be done in small increments of time. And then that small group learning is really where you provide the opportunity for teachers to differentiate, to provide those interventions, and to provide enrichment to the students that need that. So that can and very well may be a shift for some of our middle school and high school teachers.
The plan is 25 pages or 30 pages long and a little more in depth. So we're giving you a scope of it. Lisa, am I missing anything? Did we miss?
I don't think so. I think that one of the things that we've done at the secondary level this year is ask the department chairs and leaders to help us generate lists and ideas of interventions. Because as we're working through our plans and we're coming together as our MTSS committee for our meetings, it's one thing for all of us to be sitting at the table, but we need ideas. So we've been asking the teachers for more ideas for what, their supports they want. And that's another piece that Branching Mind provides, is that there's a ton of resources that you can pull from menus up within there of like, here are suggestions on if a student is struggling with this, here are some suggestions for how to meet that need. So
Right.
I think as we dive more into that, like Jeff was saying, we're moving slow into Branching Minds. I think that we'll find more of those little resources that will be helpful.
Something that Jeff, you shared about 1.5 years ago with our admin team, when you were talking about after you came back from the work that you did, the PD, when I questioned about the AIS piece or the RTI piece, you said, well, we didn't used to incorporate those behaviors, the social emotional, the attempt, like that would be done separately, but it wasn't tiered. And that's something that really stayed with me. That makes it I think you talked about it being just like a bigger umbrella, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll be speaking about this a little bit next week at the board meeting, but it encompasses PBIS as well, right? That falls under the MTSS umbrella. And I think joining them all together is really what we need to do, instead of looking at them in isolation or in buckets. The other thing, so again, the document's kind of a work in progress, but to Lisa's point, and the appendices of the document, it'll talk to the different screenings and diagnostic assessments that we're using at each grade level K-12, and the different resources that we have available to build to support our students K-12, which is fantastic. But again, Branching Minds gives a variety of resources and assessment tools in addition to what we currently have.
And I think the one thing about MTSS, I just want to kind of clarify is, and what I'm very happy and proud of the work that everyone's done, is we've done this work in silos, and it hasn't been done in a cohesive manner, in a very, structured kind of expectation across the board. And this is the work that they're doing to really, and then it's been 1.5 years work to get to this point of getting it there. So I think this is a step forward for the district in making sure that there's clear expectations on what it looks like. And this whole picture here, I think kind of hits it all, is it's the whole child. It's not just the academic component. It's not just the social emotional component, because those are all done on individuals. This is all together looking at the whole, the self, which I think, again, just takes all the work that people have been doing and puts it into one kind of place.
And to give credit, I do want to say our teachers do a lot of these things, just don't know how to name it that way or have the appropriate data tracking. So that's a great place to build upon.
Because that's often the conversation when we talk about, well, that's an intervention. They're like, oh.
Yeah.
So because it seems like I have to take on 10 more things with that child, and it's not. It's just
You have
tracking
been
what I'm
doing them.
already
It's
doing.
just what you're already doing.
So that's because it's easy to become very overwhelmed.
Is there any, I know Jeff has a 5. Is there any questions on MTSS? All right. All right, Jeff.
You want to do this?
Appreciate it.
Yeah, do you want to switch to the cell phone quick? Just before we get into it, just because. Where are we?
It's all the way at the end.
All right, thank you. Oh, it's a cell phone. I did not need to do that, did I? All right. I thought there was something else. All right, so as y'all know, the plan's coming out regarding, we have to have the change in our cell phone plan. We're working on it. We're talking to stakeholders, having conversations. Robin asked a great question the other day, and we actually then shared that question out with principals, and principals are sharing it. And the question was, how does it impact instruction, right? And one of the things that you can get in a policy and you can ask for is you can ask for a caveat for it to be used in educational purposes. So Lisa and Brianna have actually reached out to people and then use it in their curriculum. And Lisa, do you want to kind of share some of the feedback that you've been getting? Because it was, it was pretty insightful what you shared yesterday.
So we had surveyed students, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago now about what their thoughts were about cell phones. And then we had done a similar thing with staff. But then last week we did ask again to staff, if you use cell phones in your curriculum now, how do you see that looking different next year? And what solutions do you have for that current situation? So, a couple of big things that came up was that audiobooks, for example. So we've got a lot of students that might be students with disabilities. We've got a lot of students that don't really love reading hard books, but they like listening to audiobooks. Currently, our Chromebooks don't allow for Bluetooth to be enabled. To me, that seems like a really simple fix that we allow that to happen, because we also know that some students use music as a coping mechanism. And so if we can open up that Bluetooth technology, I think that that's a very easy fix. We had some biology teachers reach out saying that, again, it came down to videos. They were watching things on their phone that they couldn't necessarily connect to. But again, it was that Bluetooth capability. Some of our teachers were using cell phones to take pictures and then upload it to Google Classroom of their assignments. So the teacher said, well, our Chromebooks can do that. So all of the responses from the teachers at the secondary level were that they don't want any academic exceptions because they don't want to be the one person they're allowed to use it in. And then it creates chaos within the students because, oh, I can use it in Ms. Conway's class, but I can't use it in this class. And so they don't want that. They want a set policy that there's no phones. So then there's no ambiguity. And everyone seems to be coming up with suggestions. So like when we are using robotics, we can have iPads that are doing the same thing, but they're iPads that are purchased by us, that are managed by us. And so we can do that within our system.
In middle school, Brianna said like they've already not been using
Yeah.
phones for a year, so it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. So there was no real impact. It was high school, and I thought it was a great question. So Lisa immediately reached out and got some feedback on it. So I appreciate that. And I figured since you were here, might as well share it.
Yeah, that's good. So.
Any thoughts, questions on that?
When you talk about the Bluetooth, that's an issue because they otherwise would be able to connect to your.
So it was, I believe, that they had disconnected them because kids could figure out how to then connect to Promethean boards. So they were interrupting classes by connecting to the Promethean boards while the teachers were trying to present. So
That's kind of funny.
it's kind of,
For you.
Yeah.
setting expectations.
Is that a
Yeah, not
problem
for
we
the
actually
teacher.
had here?
I think that it was
Yes, I think
actually a
so.
problem.
I was not aware of that.
And I think that they were doing it in the commons, so they were then displaying things up in the commons that,
With their cell phones or
with their Chromebooks.
that's going to be an
Yeah,
issue.
so that's why it was. So
Okay.
that's why we have some more limitations is you have to have the code to be able to log into the Promethean board and
Well,
things like
right,
that.
because
So-
now they have
So
to.
Yeah,
we,
yeah, yeah.
we
Allow
have
it.
some
That
other
makes more
tiers
sense.
in
I
there
could
now.
see, I'm laughing a little because I don't have to deal with
Yeah,
it, but
'cause
I
you
could
don't have to
imagine.
deal with that,
And I
so-
might have been the kid doing that when I was in
Yeah.
school.
Yeah,
But that's kind
so,
of funny. That's fine. Horrible. I would have been that kid getting in trouble for it.
Kids get bored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's-
But the other question that came up with this, actually, with the Bluetooth component of was, do you allow Bluetooth headphones? Because some
I was
schools
gonna ask
are
that.
saying, when they say electronics, the optional
Yes.
component, they're saying no headphones at all, right?
Right.
And I don't think, based on the stakeholder input I have, it's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that headphones are something that people want to have. We're not going to limit that because then it would limit other opportunities for us. But that are some schools, they say no Bluetooth at all. They no
Yeah,
headphones.
they put
at
it all in that
They put it all. in
yonder or whatever, yeah.
I don't know if that's from what I'm picking up and hearing, I don't think that's the best recommendation.
The reason I ask is because I'm looking at the kind of the NISBA
Yeah, we went through that.
sample
Yeah.
policy in terms of whether or not I thought, but I could be
It's
wrong.
optional.
Okay.
It's
The
optional.
year, but okay.
Yeah, so that was one. So what we've been doing is going through bit by bit of the policy and saying how it impacts stakeholders. And that was one of the things that we went through was the optional component. And I don't think that the stakeholders are really feeling that the optional component is where we need to go, nor do I. I agree with it. It's like, stick with what the state's mandating, and the state is mandating this smartwatches, enabled internet devices. I don't think we should make any more issues with that and just keep what it is, because people are making valid points of how it can impact instruction. We don't want to impact instruction.
Yeah.
No, but you're totally right. That was one of the extra components of it. I've read that policy multiple times over the past few days. Yeah, it's right there in there. Yeah. So, awesome. Anything else for Lisa, since we had her? Right. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So one thing I just wanted to kind of share, since we are held accountable for it, and it does go out about it, is just our testing program itself and the refusals, because that is something that the state does say you have to have them come, they have to do it. So it's good for you to know where our refusals are.
Exactly.
Right. And Karen kind of shared it with me. I'm like, you know what? That's something we should share is how, how many refusals we have, how many kids take the test, and just in general. So,
So I will say, I'll start off by reminding people that, accountability purposes, the state wants us to be at 95%. So just to follow up with what you're saying, put that in there. When you're looking at the math refusals, it is not including anybody who was an algebra test taker. Earth science test taker wouldn't be included as refusal. They are taking a test. So we can move to this ELA. And I thought it would be interesting just to see from last year to this year what things look like. So the purple is our refusal rate this year. And you can see the percentages, for the most part, except for 7th grade, have gone up. We were really in a good place for a while, and I do think that the widespread internet issues that the state was having, not us, it made the news. It was statewide. It was really the third-party vendor, NWEA, that we were fortunate, even though we were having this situation and things were freezing and not loading up for a while. The day that we started in the middle school, we were able to get everything all settled. But I do think that made people a little shy of wanting to, if my student wasn't there that day, I'm not going to bother, that kind of a thing. So we had additional refusals come in, or if somebody did part of a test and didn't necessarily finish it. So we did have some refusals. Usually math tends to be a little bit higher in refusals because it's our second test and kids tend to talk to their parents. Oh, my friend Robin didn't have to do it. Can you do that? So if you go on to math, you'll see here, that's not exactly true for us. And that's what really makes me think some of those numbers for ELA were because of that crazy internet issue.
Wait, out in 7th grade.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. So as I said, we usually do have a little bit more for math, but our science, I did not make a chart, but grades 5 and 8, if you keep on math for one sec, if you go back.
Yep.
5 and 8 look pretty similar. So science for grade 5 had 13%, I believe, I wrote it down. Yep, and grade 8 had 23%. So very close to what the math numbers look like. And then just because I have one last slide, which depicts the percentage of the refusals that were special ed students, because I do get asked that sometimes. And that is interesting to me, how large that the refusals for 6th grade, almost half of them were special ed students, but you don't see that everywhere else. You do see some larger components there in 4th and 5th, but I had to take a look. 6th grade has 14% of the students are special education students identified. So that is a big chunk. And I don't know why, but I thought I would share that. Don't know if you guys have any other questions you'd like me to look into when it comes to the refusals, their participation or anything. But that's really all.
Thank you.
Karen, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Did you say 23% of the 8th graders were refusals, or 23% of the 8th grade refusals were special ed?
So 23% refused the Science 8 test.
Okay, got it.
23% of the students, yeah. The 8th grade every year tends to be the smallest group of students taking the tests.
Wow. Huh. Wow, that's like a quarter of them. That's like substantial.
Yes.
It is.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And now, what does it look like that day of testing for students that are refusing? Where do they go? What do they do? Kind of what's the procedure?
So the students, I believe this year we're down in, maybe the cafeteria, library.
Commons, yeah, cafeteria commons, library.
Yeah,
they
they're
have
not,
large-
they do work, they have book, they can read, they can do schoolwork. They don't do anything on a Chromebook.
They have coloring paper.
There's no technology.
Because the feedback sometimes is that it seems like the kids that aren't taking it are just hanging out and having fun. Now, mind you, this is the children's perception. I'm
Yeah.
not telling you that's what's occurring.
Right.
So just something
To
perhaps
consider.
to consider.
I think
Because
that's,
if it seems like the more enjoyable option,
then we try to persuade, yeah, I know.
because I
somebody
have
not to-
seen, yes.
It's interesting because I remember years and years and years ago when we first started seeing some of the larger numbers of refusals. I think it was Schenectady City School District would
Mhm.
say, you can refuse a test, but we still need to know how you're doing. So we're going to give you our own benchmark
Yes.
to do at this time.
Yes.
So that we can have data because it's
It's not a
important
bad
to
idea,
us.
actually.
So that was something that they did years ago.
We, in the elementary school, they are all given a packet of work to do, and there is someone supervising them. And I have gone in to work with students that, are on my caseload that
Have refused.
have refused, and they're not doing anything fun.
Yeah.
Are they doing- So in elementary school, they're grade level specific, and middle school, is it 6th, 7th, and 8th grade altogether in
I
one
believe
area,
it
or
is.
is it?
And in the elementary school, when the tests do overlap, they are mixed.
They are.
Yeah.
But they're
I
like,
think about that.
they put up tables and they don't let them like max out the table. They have like 2 kids per table. It's kind of
Yeah.
very
No, I think
quiet.
this is,
It's-
it's a good thing to visit.
I agree,
Yeah,
because
appreciate
that can
bringing that up.
definitely help our,
And again, it very well, we know that the kids' perception of things that they then take home to their parents is
Right.
very much not always the reality. So just,
right.
that's why I was asking, just curious
You know,
what
I
it looks
I
like.
agree.
It's a good conversation for us to visit.
Yeah.
And are we getting that much out of that instructional time for those kids?
Right.
Right? Because is there something else we can be doing for them? I think it's a really good point.
That was it.
Yeah. So this isn't something, I always get these numbers, but I haven't shared them before with the board. So that's why Karen gave us the memo. And I was like, let's just talk about the curriculum committee. Because again, this is something that we're held accountable for. This is something that comes up. And I
And
just,
having that conversation
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
us think about, okay, well,
right.
that's
And
the
I think,
perception.
again, when we look at some of these numbers, like 23% of the students don't take this, that's a lot. That's a large percentage.
Yeah.
That we're not getting that benchmarking for, right?
Right.
And 47% of special education students in the grade, it just makes you, it
I don't want
starts
to say
asking you questions.
47% of the special ed students, I want to say of the kids who refused,
Right.
half of them, almost half of them were.
I
There you go.
understand. I understand.
Because that,
Yeah, thank you. I
Yeah.
said that wrong, so I
That makes
appreciate
I
that.
don't want to
Yeah.
confuse anybody. So media literacy,
All right.
thank you. I want to start with this interesting, what I thought was an interesting survey. And this is shared from a New York State resource. And forgive me for reading a little bit of this to you, but I do think it's interesting. It's from Stanford History Education Group, and it's probably about 7 or 8 years old now. But more than 80% of middle school students could not differentiate between a news story and an advertisement. More than 80% of high school students could not effectively distinguish between legitimate and dubious sources of information. Nearly 70% of undergraduate students could not effectively explain how the political agendas of different organizations might influence the content of tweets.
I think that's probably true. for
I think it's
adults in
probably
society.
And you know what, Kelly? I love that you say that, because I am going to tell you that when I'm on Instagram and I'm seeing reels and come up, and I think to myself, oh, that's interesting. Oh yeah, let me what? Oh, wait a minute. She getting paid to do that because she just looks like a regular old Joe showing me this cleaning
Yeah.
product or these great shoes, but on her link it's bringing me right to somebody's site. So, you do have to think. You do have to think. So what I wanted to do now that we think about this is recognize that, well, this is something we really want to think about, right, with our students. So I started with that survey bit, but now I want to talk about what is media literacy. And this comes from that same resource that I was just talking about, New York State Media Literacy Toolkit. It refers to the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. The focus is on building critical thinking skills and evaluating the credibility of information. So next slide, the media literacy toolkit is something that Governor Hochul had released this January. And this was done in, I think, in cooperation with New York State Department of Homeland Security and field specialists in the field. And it really is an argument for the importance of teaching these skills, these critical thinking and analyzing skills. It's an ideologically neutral product, but it's a lot of resources in there for educators to be able to look at and use and to help them with their own, with their own content. So next slide. Many of the skills that you are thinking of with critical analysis are already broadly, I want to say broadly, embedded into our content standards. Let's take a look at the next slide. I'm going to go through a couple of them. Delineate and evaluate an argument and specific claims in a text, assessing the validity or fallacy of key statements by examining whether the supporting evidence is relevant and sufficient. That's English Language Arts, a reading standard for 910. And next one. Gather, read, and synthesize information from multiple appropriate sources and assess the credibility, accuracy, and possible bias of each publication and methods used, and describe how they are supported or not supported by evidence. That's our middle school science and engineering practices. And another one. Analyze evidence in terms of historical and or social context, content, authorship, point of view, purpose and format. Identify bias. Explain the role of bias, context, and audience in presenting arguments or evidence. That's our grade 8 practice, social studies practice, gathering, interpreting, and using evidence. So
Can I interrupt
of course,
there? So those three things that you just went
Yeah.
through, those are what? Those are standards by which the state suggests? Or
No,
No, those are
required.
mandated
Those are
standards.
yes.
Yeah, those are our standards that guide the curriculum in New York State.
Okay.
Yeah,
There are-
standards and practices, right? Because those are middle. I have the first one is a specific standard. The others have been introduced as practices
Yeah.
that we are engaged in, and that's how we deliver our content.
Okay.
Some are specifics, but I will say these are broad.
Yeah.
We're doing this with text in literature, right? I was an English teacher. We did those kinds of analysis, and you could probably even come up with some in world
Can I
language.
say one thing
Please.
just to add to,
Yeah.
because I'm making an assumption of your thought process, man. So the curriculum itself is set by the standards, and this is what the state says. And then this digital literacy, the media literacy, the civic stuff, that is an add-on that they're asking you to think about or consider as you're doing education, but it's not mandated. The ones that Karen is saying they're mandated, but now they're giving you kind of a focus of where they want schools to kind of go, but
And
you
to
can
consider and
choose
to
to go
start
there,
thinking about.
consider to do that, but it's not the mandate. The mandate is the broad, but now they're giving you more finite kind of ways to think about education. But
So-
this isn't mandated yet.
Right.
Okay.
So what I would
Does that
say
help
is
a little?
Yeah, it
while
does. Thank
those
you very much.
skills are mandated through these content area, focusing on media literacy, what I guess the way I think about this is that I think there have been concerns that with so much that we're consuming now, all this information through, social media and news being online and everything that's embedded in that as well,
And
the advertisements, the whatever, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, which they go through all three of those, right? In that toolkit, there is a growing desire for our students to have more specific lessons, opportunities to try to learn how to decipher those things. And that's really what the media literacy is. So I just wanted to start by saying, we do have these skills broadly in our curriculum. And so there should be places for us to put this in and embed. So if you go to, yes, thank you very much. So over the past year, we had been really looking at the computer science and digital. Oh, no, go back one, if you wouldn't mind.
Yep.
To the digital fluency standards. And I worked with the principals at the secondary level in particular with our technology TOSA, with our department chairs and leaders. And we started going through all that work. And then as we got the media literacy toolkit was released, now we have this other bit. So now we've kind of like teased out what is specific to the media literacy that we weren't really attacking in that, right? And we reviewed resources. The past few months, we've been really getting into this, where we've been reviewing the resources like News Literacy Project, Checkology, very good crash course, Common Sense, which I love the Common Sense site. I think that's really great. And in our discussions, we talked about, what do we want this to look like? How can we start working and building this and providing these opportunities for students to have these critical thinking skills with this type of stuff. So middle school, we're looking at a mini course for all sixth graders. Oh, yeah, please. No, go back.
Oh,
Thank you. Mini course for all sixth graders. Sixth graders in grade 6. That's a little redundant. Sorry about that. And also to weave in these lessons, K-12 and developmentally appropriate lessons, K-12, and to start having these conversations. So kids are hearing this again and again, and spirals through in different types of lessons, but with this idea of media literacy and really making students a little bit more savvy than where we are right now. And so we kind of came up with this K plan. This is at a minimum, but this would be, and you can go to that next slide, thank you, for next year. In the elementary, as I said, we really like those common sense lessons. And at the elementary, we're looking at K-5 being done during the library special. And 1 lesson a year, 1 to 2 lessons a year, maybe 2 lessons a year for grades 3 and 5 right now, because as I said, Common Sense has 1 for this news and media literacy. Grades 3 through 5 there, you can see they would do their grade level and then the lesson from the year before, just to build on it a little bit more. So it would only be a couple lessons, but they're really good. Like this 3rd grade one is called Is Seeing Believing. So they look at how photos and videos can be altered. Why would somebody want to do, like, first of all, recognizing that happens. They start with their like little do now is a lemon cut open, and each of the little sections of it are a different color. Look at what happens if you do this with a lemon, and do you think this would really have, and they have that conversation, then they start moving into looking at these videos that have been altered and talking about it. And you can see reading news online, I think very good. So grade 6 would be done in our business class that everybody has. And crash course is kind of where we're leaning right now, kind of what Mary Farber Pack was looking at as well. There are 12 10-minute video lessons, and then you can expand that into, and these are bias.
Does that have the algorithm one? Because that was amazing.
That was Checkology.
Oh my
I was going to send that. I was going to actually start by playing it, but I decided not to. Start with something. And then grade 7 through 12, we have the grade level lesson and the lesson before. These are from Common Sense. And right away, as we were having these conversations, Mr. Stumbo, who's department chair for English, was like, these are great for English. Like, we could easily do this in English. So I'm putting in parentheses because I think we don't want one place to have the burden. We want students to see this conversation in multiple places. But something like challenging confirmation bias, that's a grade 11 one, talks about the brain and how our brain looks to keep ourselves consistent with what we already believe, right? And so that could easily be in a science place. They're really interesting lessons. And what I did was on the next slide, unless you have any questions about this before we move.
I just want to state something that I think is important. It's kudos to you and the work that you've done on this, because it's solidifying it in a way that gives us somewhere to work from.
Right.
It starts the conversation. Teachers can share what they're doing in these classrooms. Other teachers in other classes can learn from it, but it says, as a district, here's what we're doing, and we're focusing in on this as a team, but there's still room to grow. So I think this is really, it's good work. You've done a lot of work. So.
And the other piece, I guess, with that, with the work that's here is that we will be continuing the conversations with the department chairs and the teachers, because I think building the awareness so that everybody will know what we're already establishing. But I think when teachers get time to see the resources, they may say, that's great. I think we should all be doing this one too, but they won't be touching the ones that we already know.
And it can be a 1 minute add-on. It doesn't have
exactly,
to be a ton of stuff.
exactly.
This also sounds like an area that we could develop some electives for, because
100%.
we're always looking for
Absolutely.
ways. And yes, there are things that we want to make sure everybody
gets, exactly.
but there
I love
could
that.
be like a
Civic
deeper
signal.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great
Because
idea.
and really we all need to take the course because we have to remind ourselves.
We're human too.
Karen-
It's easy.
They're called influencers for a reason.
Right.
Karen sent me an algorithm thing, and I'm gonna tell you, I called her right after I got done watching, going, this was great. I
Yeah.
go, there are things here that I had no clue.
Right.
And the fact that we have kids coming out of high school who don't, I'm almost 50 and I don't
Right.
understand this stuff. Like,
Well,
I have
we didn't-
kids living in
yeah.
a world by algorithms.
Exactly.
Well,
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, and I was just gonna say that I think another reason, yet another reason, in addition to the ones that are just, I think, hopefully so obvious in terms of just being, this is where our information is now. And it's just so important to be able to, function civically, to be able to distinguish and understand information and to analyze it and to be able to sniff out, so to speak, information that just doesn't pass that sniff test. And then in addition to that, I was having a conversation last night with my wife and my kids and a friend about just kind of this constant, struggle you have about kids and social media and phones. The conversation ended up, in part pivoting to, and it really kind of made a kind of profound impact. I mean, was that whether we like it or not, this is an area where people are now making a living.
Yes.
And college courses and careers are now, for better or worse, according to your personal opinion, and that's not relevant here, but that's where careers are being made now. And so if someone is going to commit themselves and their time and their dedication to technological or to social media and to online news, then I think it's even more important that they have a proper foundation to make things better as opposed to worse, which I think,
Yeah.
I think objectively, I don't think that people can disagree that the state of, for information differentiation is, it's not good in this, where we're at. And so that's why,
There's
to
so
echo,
much that comes at us.
right. And to echo Frank's kudos, I mean, I think it's, thank you for all the work that you're doing in order to make, and faculty and staff, everybody, ensuring that it's baked into the curriculum and that students have exposure to this.
I think it's.
And I mean, I think the example you gave here fits everything we just said. That the comment says news and media literacy, the reading news online, grade 5 gets to learn this now, right?
Yeah.
Understanding different parts of an online news page, learn about things to watch out for when reading an online news page, such as sponsored content, advertisements, who's it's coming from. I think this
They
is a
even
great
go right
skill.
down to the little video that they have for this. They show the URL and they say, a valid news organization will usually have this at the end of their thing. Pay attention to what this looks like. And it's just really well done. I think these lessons are really well done. Just in their first 5 minutes they're due now is saying, I'm going to put up a slide and I'm to the class and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to call on the first hand I see about what your thoughts are on this slide, puts it on, it just says breaking news or whatever. And just the idea that now the conversation is, how did that make you feel? Why did you want to be the person that I called on? And they talk about that and then they move into this little lesson so that you wouldn't have to worry about the links I've printed for people to take a look at, because I really think these are good lessons. So what they do with this breaking news, if you don't mind me just quickly showing you, they talk about what I think is happening and then what's missing or inaccurate. And you've got 3 little places where people are getting information. One is this little Metro News social alert. Then you've got something that looks like, maybe like a tweet, and something from myrights.com or something. And students would sit down, write down, what they think is happening. And then on the next page where they read the little full news article, they'll say, people are jumping to conclusions. They're saying this, or they haven't added that. And it's just, I think, a really thoughtful, well done way to do this. They have, for even, like, I looked at the kindergarten one, which was more like thinking about how much time we should be online and offline and playing outside, and it was more like that. But I thought that these came off very appropriate and thoughtful. So, that was that one. I think I mentioned a couple of the other ones, hoaxes and fakes. I didn't talk about that, but that kind of gives you a feel for those things. But do you have any thoughts about this or questions you need to follow up on?
No, I do think this is excellent because it's definitely needed. You know, even at the high school level that I see students, some of them still, you could tell, are not really sure if
Right.
what they're looking at is accurate at all. Is the person posting this, is it from a company that's selling you something? Is it from somebody, you know, an animal rights group? And so they're going to skew it one way as opposed to, you know, the NRA or something, you know, like.
There's going to be
To kind of-
to understand that
Yeah.
somebody comes in with a point of view.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I had my niece say, now she's a freshman, she just finished her freshman year at Syracuse. And you know where she gets her news from?
TikTok.
My older daughter reposting things.
Oh, yes, I've heard, yes.
Which is
say that
fine
too,
with
yes.
me.
But
But
I hear TikTok all the time.
Oh, yeah, that's where they're getting there, you know, so like you really do need to be able to sort through an awful lot that's out there.
Yeah.
And in the same sense, I mean, to that question, I mean, I really, you know, when I take Bob Phillips' words to heart, if you can't leave, get out of the way, and times are changing, and, you know, I try not to be resistant to the fact that, to some degree, TikTok may very well have some very capable people
Yes.
who are producing and researching content, but therein lies the issue, because the people who are taking the information and need to know what it is that they're looking at.
Yeah.
And I mean, just today, for example, I saw something and I can't even remember where it said, oh, you know, Harvard is offering a free course on government or whatever. And we Google, and of course, my detectors go off and something's not right here. And all you gotta do is move over to your next tab and Google it. And, one of the first results is a fact check that says not quite.
Yeah, it's interesting because lateral reading was something that came up that they talk about, which is not something that I've remembered. Maybe I've heard of, but we learn to read vertically, and lateral reading is you're leaving this up and you're opening another tab, and now you're looking it up. I was like,
never heard of it put that way.
yeah,
I've
and
been
so
doing
that's
that
one of the
for a good
lessons in
several
this
years.
thing.
Yeah,
I was
that's
like,
actually
really, really smart, right?
You taught us all something today, so thank you.
Yes.
We're
Thank you.
almost at 5:30, so
And we did it.
I know. Any thoughts, questions, or Barbara? I lost her.
Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute myself. No, this is great. Thank you for all of that. This is really, an amazing topic. And I was thinking, as you were talking about this, I need to look at more of this because we're doing some of these things at the museum with super early education, of fact and fiction. So it's interesting that it's sort of everywhere.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to stop recording. All right, Barbara. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.